Welcome everybody. We're going to start our final section of lesson 1, and today we're just going to talk a little bit about sums, right? Adding is sums and differences, which means subtraction. Really the big idea here is we just want to deepen our number sense today. So the first little problem we're going to go through is we're going to organize these numbers on a number line, or in other words, try to organize them from least to greatest. Obviously, you probably look at this and you think, well, there's some numbers here that I could place on a number line, or I kind of understand what they are, right? Like negative 3.1, 2.1. Generally, when numbers are decimals or nice whole numbers like 2, 3, 4, we can kind of visualize what that number is or where it is on the number line. Whereas these other ones, when they're fractions or square roots, sometimes those are harder to organize on a number line. So in order to do that, we have to have just kind of a general idea of what that number actually is. Again, we don't have to know exactly what it is if we're going to just order them from least to greatest, but we just have to have a general idea. So for instance, I'm going to use these little squiggly brackets because that means about, because I'm not going to know the exact number if I'm just doing this in my head. If I'm thinking about 1/8, I'm going to be thinking, well, 1/8, obviously bigger than 0, but it's still going to be less than 1 because 8/8 would be 1. So it's a number that's between 0 and 1 because it's a fraction. So I might think, well, it's closer to 0 because it's only 1/8, right? If you think about a pie, you only have 1/8 of the pie. That's just one little slice. So maybe I'm going to say that this is about 0.15. I don't know. Doesn't matter. As long as you say it's about some number between 0 and 1. This next one is square root of 6. Well, with square roots, you kind of have to think about square roots that you know. Well, I know square root of 4, hopefully you know this, hopefully you'll know that it's 2. I know that square root of 9 is 3. So hopefully you would agree with me when I say, well, square root of 5 then would have to be somewhere between 2 and 3. Probably a little bit closer to the 2 than the 3 because 5 is closer to 4 than it is to 9. So maybe I'll say that this is about 2.2, somewhere in there. Again, I already have these ones as decimals. And then this last one, again, if you know, hopefully we'll kind of know what this one is. Or if you think about it, 2 can go into 5 twice. 2 times 2 is 4. So then I just have a half left. So this is actually negative 2.5. Once I've done this, and this one actually is exactly 2.5, right? That was an easy decimal or fraction to simplify. I now have to organize them from least to greatest. So if we think about a number line, right, the bigger the number in terms of negativity, right, it goes -5, -4. -5 is actually smaller than -4, which sometimes is a little bit weird to think about. But the bigger the number in terms of negative, the actually smaller it is. Right, the further left on the number line it is. So if I think about placing these numbers on a number line or ordering them from least to greatest, my smallest number is going to be my biggest negative number. So that looks like it's going to be a negative 3.1. So least to greatest, that's my smallest. I have one other negative number. It's this negative 5/2 or negative 2.5. So I'm going to put negative 5/2 because that's what we started with. Don't have any more negatives, so I can start going into positives to get my bigger numbers. Well, looks like my next biggest number would be 1/8. This is 0.15. Next, I have this 2.1. I'm just going to cross them off or circle them as I go so I don't reuse them. And then lastly, square root of 6 would be my last one. So there again, I ordered them from least to greatest, and it's just trying to kind of guesstimate what these numbers are. Is 1/8 exactly 0.15? Absolutely not. But again, just a general idea is all we need. So if you're doing a problem like this, it's helpful if you write what you think it is, just so I can see where you're at. And let's say you you estimate that one completely wrong, then I can try to give you partial credit along the way. So if you said maybe 1/8 was 15, not 0.15, and you put that as the greatest number, I could see where you made your mistake and I could try to help you along that way. Last ones here, just some sum and difference problems. So sum again is addition. 3 plus 5, you're probably thinking, well, duh, that's 8. But just showing you how you do it on a number line in case you don't have a calculator and you kind of have a brain fart or something like that. If you do 3 plus 5, right, you just start at 3 on the number line and you just go over 5 spots. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I just do those little bunny rabbit hops. Looks like I get at 8. Same thing here, 3 plus a negative 5. Well, negative 5 means I got to go left. So I start at 3, go left 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I end at negative 2. Obviously, if you can do these in your head, you do not have to make a number line and do the little hops. It's just a way to check if you're, again, having a brain fart. Negative 3 plus 5, I start at negative 3. I go right 5 since I'm adding. Looks like I get 2. And negative 3 plus a negative 5, again, negative means I got to go left 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like I get a negative 8. Again, just showing you how I can use that number line to do some simple addition. Why don't you try this one real quick and input your answer on Edpuzzle. You should have gotten negative 2 as your answer. For this first one too, just so you have it, you should have negative 5. One word that you might hear sometimes is the additive inverse, and that's just the number and its opposite, or two numbers that are the same distance away from 0. So for instance, if I asked you what's the additive inverse of 3, you would say negative 3. Because if you think about a number line, oops, not a very straight number line, three and negative 3 are exactly 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 places away from 0. So that's what makes them additive inverses. Or another thing to think about, they're additive inverses if you add them together, and they're going to give you 0. So 3 plus a negative 3 gives you 0. The way I think of it, though, is just that they are opposite. So if I asked you what's the additive inverse of negative 17, you would say, input on Edpuzzle, 17. Very good. Last one, just some difference problems just to talk through real quick. With difference, right, subtraction problems, whenever you see two negatives by each other or minus a negative, hopefully you remember that that means that that turns into plus, right? Minus and negative actually makes it addition. I always change them like this on there just so I remember. So I have negative 8 plus 13. Again, if you have to make a number line, you can definitely do that and do your hops. Start at negative 8, go over 13 spots. But hopefully you recognize that this is just 5. C, let's skip to C here quick because that's the easier one. 9 minus 9, obviously 0. And then with this decimal one, this is always a good one to talk about because sometimes we forget how to subtract decimals. When the second number you're subtracting is bigger than the first, I'm going to use a little trick. I always put the bigger number first. Even though it doesn't technically come first, I'm going to put it first when it comes to subtraction. So I have 12.4 minus 3.5. And I'm going to stack them up, aligning those decimal points. Again, when you're subtracting, put the bigger number first. Now I just go ahead and subtract. So I think, well, what's 4 minus 5? Well, I can't do that, right? So if we think back to elementary days, we have to borrow. So I'm going to borrow from the 12. I'm going to make that 11, which then changes this to a 14. So now I say, well, what's 14 minus 5? Well, now that works. So that gives me 9. I carry down my decimal place. 11 minus 3 will give me 8. So I'll be thinking, well, my answer is 8.9, but not quite because I cheated kind of at the beginning, right? I switched the order here, 3.5 minus 12.4 to 12.4 minus 3.5. So if I switch the order, that means I have to know in the end I have to add a negative sign because really it's a small number minus a bigger number, so my number will be negative. So again, switch the order, but just know you have to add a negative sign in the end. So there's just a little review of adding and subtracting. Let me know, shoot me an email if you have any questions.